I was told that you have the whitest name in existence. It is. I'll have you say it.
Chaz Robert Walters.
That's not so bad. It's not Murray.
No,
It's not Murray, but it's good. Thank you for joining the Disciple of Christ podcast.
Glad to be here.
We are coming to the audience from the dirty desert of Buckeye, Arizona. Can you explain to people what a Buckeye is?
A Buckeye is a type of nut. There's a town in Ohio and a team called the Buckeyes. And from what I understand, they immigrated here in Arizona in the Western Valley. Buckeye is the largest land mass in Arizona. It's the fastest growing city in the United States. And, yeah, it's up and coming. I was here whenever there was like 40,000 people. Now we're over 100,000 people. So and we're growing quickly. And
you specifically have been active in planting olive trees here in Buckeye.
Olives, pomegranates, figs, pretty much anything you read in the Bible, I plan on planting on this property. So,
see, this is better than MTV Cribs.
Yeah, so this is MTV Garden Edition. We got some bamboo here that's trying to recover. Mulberry again. This is a blood orange, Barbados cherry, pomegranate, lime tree, blue Texas fig. We got another Vitex in the back there. Another mulberry, great shade trees, some of the fastest growing trees you could find out there. I kind of want to do some molding because these trees, like whenever they lose their leaves, you can actually put wires around them and kind of shape them to kind of do like a bonsai kind of style on them, and you can turn them into different shapes. And I've seen it where they make a shape of them wherever the sun is primarily. You can kind of make a booth where you could come in and pick all your mulberries off of inside this booth of leaves. We got olive trees, olive. They're totally legal here. Because fruiting olive trees are bad because they're super pollinators. These are completely fine olive trees here in Arizona. No allergies will be activated.
Very, very nice. Do you have a favorite?
I love figs. Figs are really good.
Okay.
I'm a real big fan of Fig Newtons. No, I'm just kidding.
Talk a little bit about the group where you and I first came across each other. It's kind of an interesting group, and I want to give a little bit of a shout out to them.
Yeah, the Latter-day Lobster group is a real fun group. So that was a really helpful group for my faith journey in the beginning. So yeah, we ended up meeting there. We have some really interesting conversations there, deep conversations. At least it used to be. It's kind of degraded a little bit, but yeah. I still appreciate the guys over there.
Let me at least point this out. The Latter-day Lobsters, and I'm putting a little bit of visuals on the screen if somebody wants to look them up. It has been a place where people have been much more at liberty to discuss things related to Mormonism or the gospel. Yeah.
It's centered around Jordan Peterson, who was a huge free speech advocate, and so the principles of that group from the very beginning was supposed to be all free speech. You could say whatever you want, whatever opinions, exmos, whatever, they were allowed there to let the best ideas win. That was the original hope of the group. But it seems like all the most important thinkers have blocked each other at this point. But what can you do?
It's like, at least it's not the government doing the censorship.
Yes,
people just block each other.
It's voluntary.
It is voluntary. It's like, block you. It's like, oh, but what if I want them to spam me with Mary Kay? Oh, it's bound to happen. Were you born and raised in Arizona? Arizona native?
Yep. Born and raised in Arizona my whole life, 27 years.
Okay. Very nice. Now, share with me some of the earliest memories that you've got growing up in Arizona. Was it what? Because you got about an acre here where I'm at.
Yep, a little under an acre. Yep, here in Buckeye. I was born in Phoenix, raised there for a little bit, but I've considered myself from Buckeye. I've been here since about third grade, and so my most fond memories are here in Buckeye. But going to rodeos, going to derbies. We used to be very country town, farms and everything. So. Some of my earliest memories here, I used to go to a Christian private school. Whenever I first started here, I felt very at home there. The smaller classrooms, the biblical verses that we had to learn, I enjoyed all that. And then I used to act out. I used to really enjoy acting. They were very in the performative arts and everything there. So they used to have us act out biblical stories, and I really enjoyed being engrossed in those biblical stories. So yeah. Those are some of my earliest, most fond memories of this small little town. My mom's from here as well. She was raised on a dairy, so she had a lot of connections here that she was able to introduce me to and their kids, and so that was always fun to make those reconnections.
I had raw milk for my very first time this morning.
Yep, right down the street. Our neighbor has a cow, and we get our milk right from her. No pasteurization required. Now you're making me have a flashback. I have a friend whose wife is deaf, and she signs, and she taught me. He had to write it down because I don't understand sign language. She taught me that
this means milk.
Yeah.
Because like you're milking a cow. And she showed me this, which means pasteurized milk. Pasteurized.
Oh, it makes sense. Okay, I like it.
Were you raised LDS?
I was not raised LDS, no.
How did that turn happen in your life?
Oh, man, where to begin with that? So I was, my grandparents were converts to the church. They were converted here in Buckeye. They had a friend that was a Mormon, and his example was what my grandfather claimed was the most converting aspect of their life, was just how well of a life they lived, how joyous they were and everything. And he was ready to go as soon as he first heard about it. Hey, this is the restored gospel. These are our doctrine. He was all on board. My grandma, on the other hand, she was very resistive. She had to, I think it was like over a year of lessons, having the missionaries come over, questioning everything. And my grandfather says, I'm not getting baptized until my wife's getting baptized, my grandma. And it's kind of a funny story. The reason why she was even willing to, because she was pretty Orthodox before then, the reason she was even willing to let the missionaries come in the door after their family friends suggested them come over the night before they were coming over, she kept having this dream where she was hearing repeatedly, Moroni, Moroni, Moroni.
Oh.
Yeah, and so she's like, she woke up that morning and she's like, what is this dream? What is Moroni, Moroni, Moroni? I guess I'm supposed to be making some macaroni. So she was making some macaroni for the missionaries, and then they came over and she told them about the dream. And they said, well, I've actually heard it pronounced that way a couple of times, but there's a prophet in our sacred scripture called Moroni, but I've heard it pronounced in certain cultures Moroni. And so that kind of piqued her interest. And so that's kind of a funny way. She always used to tell that story up at the pulpit. Macaroni. Yeah, she made macaroni and then was learning about Moroni the next second. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so from there, they ever since I was born, they've been devout members of the church, always encouraging us to become missionaries and everything, even though we weren't even members. You need to become a missionary. I'm like, I don't even know.
So you were already born when they joined the church?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom was, I think she was in her preteen ages whenever they converted.
So she was a young lady when they joined the church.
Yep. And so she was raised in the church, and ever since I was born, she was friendly to the church, but not necessarily active in the church so much. But she would bring us to the temple lights in Mesa and everything around Christmas time. And then whenever Easter would roll around, we would go up north to where my grandparents lived and attend services there. But I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, this is a nice, pretty white building, bread and water, I'm glad I'm around family. But that was the extent of my exposure.
In your youth, you're part of a Christian school. You love memorizing the verses, acting out, being a part of the theater.
Yep.
Did you feel a spiritual connection with your maker? Was there any foundations of faith being laid?
Absolutely. I mean, it was at that age, it was sort of innate. There wasn't like any reasoning behind it, or it was just a pure, simple faith at that time. But as the years started going on and me hearing more of these things and me becoming a little bit more rambunctious, I wanted to start asking some more questions. And, but ultimately, every night I would pray to my Father and I would feel his parental presence in my heart every night. And, but I didn't really have any backing or reasoning or argument.
It just felt natural.
Just felt innate. Yeah. And then, as the exposure of information started coming with the internet and everything, that's what really started to get me to question certain things. So I was the kid who was always asking the real hard questions in class of the teacher. And it's just a basic non-denominational Protestant.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. There at the school that you're at?
Yeah, whenever I was at this Christian
in front of other
school.
Kids?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's a great place to do it. There's no way their pride's going to be doing the driving in that situation.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of pride involved in everything.
In the questioning and the answering, I'm guessing. How would you feel like you're sincere, or you wanted to trip them up?
At that time, it was not as sincere. It was more of, let's see how much these adults supposedly know. Yeah.
And even that does have its value. I'm just thinking, when you're seeking for God, okay, it's going to be a stumbling block. But in general, when somebody says, this philosophy or this method that we're using to accomplish this task, if you can ask them and they fall apart, you realize, I don't think this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I need to learn.
So I can understand the value of it, but you felt like you kind of wanted to trip them up.
Yeah, that was a little bit more of the spirit.
Did you?
I think so, a couple times for sure.
Do you remember any answers that came from them that you found satisfying?
Honestly, from them, no. I don't. There's no real memory other than just when I would hear them reading from the Bible itself, from the New Testament, and me hearing the life of Christ. I was always impressed by his behaviors and how he handled things. That it's like Jesus knows something, but whenever I ask the hard questions and surrounding Jesus of the system they've constructed, it just doesn't seem very deep.
Yeah.
And even at that age, I sense that there's like, this doesn't seem like I can build something on this foundation.
And even the way that you word it right now, when you start to recognize the system they've constructed, in other words, you read from Jesus, he knows something, but these people have their own system that they've constructed. Yeah. Did you view it that way at the time? Because that's a great way to put it now.
I think, I don't think I would word it that way, but I just the way they weren't able to answer basic questions that I had as a kid, like the concerns that would come on a kid's mind whenever you learn about concepts like hell and everything. And
were you a teenager or a preteen?
I was a preteen at that time. Yeah. And so I was like...
You're going to be frustrating a lot of people the rest of your life, I can tell.
Oh, yeah, I know. I've been told that a couple times. But yeah, like even some questions like, what about people who've never heard of Jesus and they're going to hell? And they would be like, well, yeah. And I was like, just that's straightforward.
What?
Yeah. And so that was very disturbing to me. And so...
people created for hell.
Yep, the majority of creation is destined for hell, and we're lucky enough to hear the message, and we proclaim our belief in Christ, and we're good to go. Nothing else required. And I'm like, oh, okay, doesn't seem very.
Wow, what a waste.
Yeah, it seemed very wasteful to me. It seemed not very loving to me. I heard God is love and everything, so that really kind of led me down my path as I progressed into my high school years, to go, what do I believe? Maybe all these religions are just claiming a certain system, and who's to say who's right? So that's wherever I started going down the more atheistic path. Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, these guys,
and those are smart dudes.
At least are admitting that they don't know. That's what my opinion at that time was.
Which there is a significant level of honesty in recognizing I don't know. And plus, they're because they are public figures, it's easy to see their reasoning in real time, because oftentimes they're having conversations as they're placing things together. Yeah. If they've thought about it longer than you and me, I can see why that would be appealing. Yeah,
and even today, I appreciate atheists because at least they put time into thinking about these topics a lot of the time. And, so now I'm a believer. I was an atheist there for a second, but so as I'm kind of progressing towards my atheistic sphere, I've kind of dabbled with, so that was non-denominational. Let's go for Southern Baptist. Let's see if there's something to this. I'm kind of having atheistic leanings. I was the kid who's bringing Buddhist books to the Christian church camp. Are you a
teenager at this point yet?
I'm a teenager at this point. I'm like, all right, there's some pretty girls that are going here. Maybe I'll give Jesus another chance.
There's a method that girls have been employed for called flirt to convert. Hopefully they didn't employ that against you.
No, I don't think purposely, but yeah, hormones were definitely in play there. So, but I was a kid. I was always, again, the troublemaker coming into there with a Buddhist book as I'm going to Christian church camp, and let's talk about this, right? And I'm over here.
It seems like you would like to ruffle feathers.
I don't know if it's the only child thing or what, it's just stimulating to me or something. But anyways, I'm going to I'm asking them the same questions that I asked them to the Baptist, and they're kind of having similar questions. But one of the main answers that they would always give me is you just have to have faith, Chaz. And that was really frustrating to me.
What did you think they were saying with that answer? You just need to have faith.
You just need to believe something without any evidence. Okay. That's how I saw it. And that was troublesome to me. And I'm like,
I can imagine.
It's like the Muslims say the same thing. The Hindus say the same thing. They're just like, you need to believe it because it is what it is. And so you don't need any further explanation. And so that's when I was like, all right. After a couple of years, I was like, I got to go all the way without religion there for a while. Just do this Buddhist thing. It seems like it's a way of viewing the world that will lead to more peace than.
Did it feel satisfying? Like during this journey up until this point, were there certain things that felt like were giving you the best explanation or the most satisfying results?
I was getting more satisfying answers from the Buddhists because, like the atheists, they were admitting that there's a lot of things that they don't know, but they did have the more Christ-like attribute of compassionate for all sentient beings. And I had something innate with me. It's like, yeah, we should progress towards an ultimate good. But their method was, a little bit different than Christ. But there's some similarities. I give Buddha the credit. I think he kind of came right up to the coastline of the kingdom. But then he, said, let's stop right here. And so he had the right thinking, the right action, the eightfold path, but then he didn't acknowledge the parental nature, loving nature of the Father in heaven that Jesus revealed, Mm-hmm. And so I give credit to the Buddha. He very well may have accepted the gospel after he passed. I don't know. I'm not going to damn him, But I was getting some satisfaction on it, but there were certain things that were lacking where I wanted to feel the love and embrace that I felt when the simple faith. Even though I had the simple faith, but I didn't recognize how to regain that simple faith while still satisfying the intellectual part of my mind that had developed up to this point. And so I said, I'm an atheistic Buddhist. I'm an atheistic Buddhist, so maybe I'll just stick with this for a while. High school's finished up. I'm going into college now. I'm going to a very liberal college at Northern Arizona University. I'm very liberal at this point.
Well, how would that manifest? Weren't you on the Bernie train?
I was on the Bernie train.
Oh, my goodness.
I was very Bernie Sanders. And, you know, he's a good guy, ultimately. I think his soul is probably in the right place more than others. But
every individual, especially young men, every young man that I know of who has tried to figure things out goes down that route, at least for part of the time, the socialist route. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was going down the Bernie Sanders train. You know, it doesn't matter how big the government is. It's about who the government's working for kind of attitude and everything. Went to his rallies and saw some of those and everything.
Did you send him money?
I did not send him anything, no.
Goodness.
No, just my time. And I shared every post I saw.
Who saved you from the Bernie? Well, from socialism.
Well, I would say probably Jordan Peterson. So that guy that Lobster Group was based around, he started showing some of the contrast of the ideological possession that would happen to certain concepts. And I also went to a rally, one of the racially based rallies that were anti-cop and everything, and they were talking.
Was it BLM rally?
I don't think it was.
Was that
BLM.
a thing yet?
I don't think it was a thing yet, but it was the seed was being planted for that, and it was very intense. They were talking about, you know, kill the cops, pigs in a blanket,
Holy
wrap
cow!
them.
Was this Antifa?
It was definitely the seeds of them, and we were. You can leave class early and go to the rally. That's how we were.
Was this chants and things like that?
What's that?
Chants and things like that?
Oh, yeah, chants, yeah.
Because I've seen that up close and personal where they are literally summoning the demons. They're doing the chants to be able to get that emotional fervor, which now justifies whatever violence comes after.
Right, and there was cops standing right there, and they were singing it right to their face, and that innate, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. This isn't how we're supposed to be treating our fellow human beings, even though I think all human beings should be treated with dignity, and the overall message that this protest is supposed to be supporting, it wasn't being coherent all the way down to the individuals. So I felt that there was something being possessed here. And so, excuse my dog back here.
We like the dogs.
Yeah.
Is that Max?
That's Maxaruni.
Maxaruni. Both Max and Ginger, they came to wake me up gently this morning.
Yep.
Not so gently, Ginger. She was just like, come on.
Yeah, you would think it'd be Gingerly with her name Ginger, but no, she's quite enthusiastic. Yeah, so that was kind of a wake-up call. I'm like, whoa, this is kind of weird. And so I started watching Jordan Peterson and how they tried to shut him down with his speech and everything. And I'm Mr. Rambunctious. I want to be able to ask whatever questions I want to ask, you know? And so I started watching red pill videos online. You see all the ideological possession that's coming on. And I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't going to lead to progress. So that's whenever I started questioning a lot of things. I started watching Jordan Peterson's lectures on Christ. I'm like, oh, wow, this guy's actually making some sense of these doctrines that didn't make any sense to me before. What does it mean? What does the true sacrifice of Christ mean, you know, to all of us on earth? What does these symbols mean? What is the significance of the cross? What is the significance of the resurrection? And it started really opening my eyes to the importance of the story of Christ, the life of Christ.
There's a lot of talk in the Jordan Peterson community about archetype. Can you give somebody like a little bit of understanding what's meant in what is an archetype and why do people explore it?
Yeah, an archetype is like an overarching theme that seems to be built into the human psyche across cultures. So like whether you believe in a literal flood or not, there's an archetype of a flood throughout all cultures. And so all cultures have this idea of a worldwide flood that occurred. And so that's an example of an archetype. The rivaling brothers is an example of an archetype that's found throughout all cultural stories and everything. So it's just a theme that seems universal, that seems to characterize the nature of humanity.
On that lobster group, sometimes people just troll with something like a picture of one of these blue-haired socialist whales. Mm-hmm. And it'll simply ask, what archetype is this?
Yeah. And so that's... They try and keep stuff on topic in that group, and that's how I'm going to post whatever I want now. So what
the humor is good.
Yep. No, it is fun there. I will say that. And so, yeah, I was like, all right, this Jordan Peterson, maybe I need to look at the Book of Mormon from this archetypal perspective. Maybe there's something that's found in here that Joseph may have undug from his subconscious mind or whatever.
Here's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
You're recognizing the value of identifying and understanding symbols that are found all around. Right. You're diving into the Book of Mormon. Maybe I'm going to find those same kind of symbols.
Yeah, so quick recap with how I got this Book of Mormon. Then I'm like, hey, let's take a peek into it because I'd never looked in it before. In between becoming a full-blown atheistic Buddhist and me being a Baptist, my grandparents were hearing me having these questions, and so they said, let's just have the missionaries come over.
How old were you at the time?
I think I was 15.
There we go. And from your preteen years, you have experience in frustrating some of these religious teachers at your school.
Yes.
So let's send over these 19-year-old boys.
Online debates. My neighbor was the son of a pastor, and he was the Baptist preacher. The pastor lived right next door. So
did you view this part of your journey as a pursuit of truth?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's always been. I've had an innate desire to find truth.
Yeah, and I just think of how traditions oftentimes, what I'm hearing from you when people say you just need to have faith, whether it's Buddhist, whether it's Christian, you just need to have faith. It seems some version of you need to trust our traditions and stop trying to make sense.
Yeah, you need to stop thinking and just shut up and attend and be.
Don't lose your thought on the missionaries now coming over.
Yeah.
But there was a study that I saw where one person is being observed. He goes into what looks like a doctor's office. People are sitting around in chairs in a circle waiting to be called upon. And everybody in there is an actor except for the first person. Ding happens, and everybody just stands up from their chairs for a moment. And the guy sees everybody else standing. He kind of looks at one of the others, and they just kind of nod at him. Don't explain anything, maybe give a nod. And he stands up as well. Then after about 5 or 10 seconds, they all sit down again. A few minutes later, another ding. Everybody stands up, and this time, kind of more naturally, he stands up after he sees everybody else. Names get called, and people are now cycling out. And he's standing up with the ding every time. All of the people who were the prepped actors standing up with the ding are now gone. And the only people that are left are people who are being introduced to this. And when the next person came and the ding, all of the people who had just learned it by observing others minutes earlier are now teaching everybody else to stand up when the ding happens.
This is the way it's always been practiced. What are you talking about? Yeah.
False traditions are so easy to get instilled within humans.
And I think that's the importance of keeping a record, right? And from these most inspired individuals that God has, sent to the earth. And Mormons are supposed to be a record-keeping people, right? And so we're supposed to be keeping a record of our own spiritual experiences for our generations after us to be able to understand what insights that we had and everything. And these traditions, that's what I felt like was going on, is like I'm seeing 1,000 different traditions. They're all barely varied on each other.
You just need to have faith. Translation, you just need to believe it without thinking.
Yep. And so that was really bothersome to me. And so
the missionary solved it all for you.
So yeah, my grandparents were like, let's have the missionaries come over. I said, very cocky, yes, let's have the missionaries come over. I'm a slayer of every Christian debate online that I come across. This is going to be easy peasy. Let's have
teenage years in general. It is easy for studious young men, myself included when I was a young man, to really be convinced that I see the whole world pretty darn clearly, or at least better than everybody else.
Yep. And so I had them come over, super nice gentlemen. But I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation from the top Google results of why, when you type in why is Mormonism false, and so I copied and pasted images and made bullet points and everything. And they were expecting just a nice little conversation about the plan of salvation and everything.
I'm really wondering if any other missionaries, if they have come across people to where on a first meeting, somebody wants to give them a PowerPoint.
I know that they've had a lot of Christians that usually come in and tell them that how wrong they are and everything, but usually not a little kid. But so I invited them over. One of them was really humble, really able to handle my questions and sincerely answering them. And he threw me for a loop on a couple of these questions in terms of the majority of creation going to hell. It doesn't really sound like love. And he's like, oh, we got a solution for that. God finds a way for all of his children to accept his gospel after death. And I was like, all right, that makes sense. I have he's super sincere, and trying to answer my questions. He's throwing me for a loop. I'm like, all right, that actually makes more sense. That's actually kind of, you know, troublesome for my own faith-based assumptions that I was having at that point, my own system that I had developed and everything, my own religion that I didn't realize was a religion. Atheism is just a lack of belief in a God. It's not a system. But even though I had exalted my own ideals to the status of God in my psychology,
he successfully shook you off balance.
He shook me off balance a little bit, but you know, the presentation I had accumulated still doesn't mean Mormonism, right? He just had some answers I didn't expect a Christian denomination to have. The other one was a little bit more, why are we here? Why are you doing this to us? You know, that was his attitude.
How do we know this is not a simulation?
So we'll get into that. We'll get into that later. So he was like, why are we here if you don't even want to learn about Mormonism and everything? I'm like, I do want to learn about Mormonism. And so, anyways, he was a little bit more frustrated. But anyways,
you don't like hoops and jumping through them?
Yeah, mental gymnastics and everything. So they gave let me put this. They gave me a Book of Mormon, and I was like, thanks, I appreciate it. I love books, and so I put it on my shelf. And so progressed to early college, and Jordan Peterson's introduced. I'm like, all right,
about to save you from socialism.
Saves me from socialism. I'm like, I'm going to read this Book of Mormon. And there's some sections in the Book of Mormon that actually kind of encourage my socialistic inclinations.
Having all things in common, not turning away any of the poor and needy.
Law of consecration and all these other things. And so, but anyways, that was not my first experience with the Book of Mormon. So I'm like, let's look at it from this archetypal perspective. And so I opened it up to the final chapter, and I start reading, and I'm like, wow, this is really good. This is somewhat inspired. I've read some religious text up to this point, and this is actually kind of making my heart open up a little bit. That's pretty good for a fraud. And then I kind of went to the front a little bit and read a little bit more. I'm like, oh, this is kind of boring in the beginning, you know, I need blah, 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 blah. And so then
he does call out the Jews. So we won't get into that.
So I shut the book and set it back on the bookshelf. And the next day, I'm driving with my mom. As I'm down from college, we're going to do some errands. And I see two missionaries walking full garb in 120-degree weather.
Oh, goodness. What, suit jackets on? Or just
not the suit jackets,
the
but
white shirts and
white
ties.
shirts and ties and the name tag. And they're walking in front of my old non-denominational Christian school.
And this is Phoenix area, Buckeye area?
This is right down the street, Buckeye, Arizona.
Okay, so what is it, 110 degrees outside?
120. It was literally 120 degrees. They're walking, and
I just have to say, for those of you who have not experienced that, there is no relief. It is just...
Yes, you're in a microwave or an oven, And
if you're on a motorcycle, you're in a hairdryer.
Yeah. And so I'm like, Mom, let's go ahead and pull over these guys. I've never seen this before. Why? And so we pull over, and they're kind of like reactive, big-eyed, and I hop out.
Did they think they were
quick.
about to get attacked or what?
Well, yeah. I'm like, hey, you guys want to ride? And they're like, yeah. They like hesitate for a second. And
You've got air conditioning?
Yeah, and so they get into the truck, and they explain that they had run out of miles on their leased vehicle or whatever that they were given. And so I take them to their dinner that they're going to, and I say, hey, can you guys start giving me some lessons? I read the Book of Mormon for the first time last night, actually, and I would like to learn more. And they're like, yeah, totally. And so after we dropped them off, I'm like, all right, what are the chances of that? Maybe I need to look into this a little bit more. Maybe this isn't just all psychological archetypal. That's like one in a million chances. Maybe there is something going on that I need to wake up to. And so I started reading more, and I started questioning. I'm like, man, that's a lot of sacrifice that these guys are doing, going out here in 120 degrees even. They're still on their mission that we're going to go, service this family. We're going to go eat. And so me being intellectually inclined, I say Mormon intellectuals. I'm like, there's institutions around here. I've been to Utah before, so I saw whole cities based around these temples and everything. I'm like, this is a lot. This is more than my non-denominational little chapel that they got going on. So what is this really about? It's not just something two-dimensional like these other little, no offense to them, I love them, keep worshiping as best as you can.
There's something clearly established.
There's something more here. There's something like, there's a people here. There's a whole culture based around these guys. So let's figure it out. And so I type in Mormon intellectuals, and I start coming across UNIBLY. I start finding organizations like the Mormon Transhumanist Organization.
Wow.
And
Mormon transhumanist.
Me being a sci-fi lover my whole life, me being, spiritually inclined.
They're going to assimilate you into the Borg.
Right, something like that, Star Trek kind of thing. And so I'm watching some of these presentations by these individuals, and I'm like, wow, these guys are sincerely questioning these things. And I could see these guys holding their own against Richard Dawkins types and actually having good comebacks. And I'm hearing arguments I've never heard about.
When people publish uncomfortable or unpopular beliefs, they tend to get battle hardened.
Yes.
Somewhat quick. They know what the arguments for and against it are.
Yeah, and
that's probably the main reason why I'm firmly against censorship.
Absolutely, yeah. And so these guys, these missionaries, at least the majority of the ones that come in, they're answering my questions with sincerity. They're actually thought about this stuff. They're not just saying have faith. I don't want to think about it because it's going to make me have myself a faith crisis if I even try and think about these questions. And so I come across some Mormon transhumanists, and they're making arguments about simulation theory, and I'm hearing about this King Follett discourse that Joseph Smith is talking about, and he's expounding on the nature of man and God and his relationship to God. And I'm like, this is profound stuff. Like, this makes sense. It's just the way you observe the world, and it seems like, all right, God's a father. He wants his kids to be like him. And so that means that we need to mature in faith until faith becomes a knowledge, and knowledge becomes a certainty, and that our way of life is serving the highest ideal of creation. And I'm like, that makes complete sense to me. And these guys are talking about the more outskirt type of stuff that you don't necessarily hear from the missionaries for the first time. So I'm like, whoa, this is big gun. Like, it's making my brain really feel like it's receiving more light that it hadn't received before.
Because I'm noticing a pattern in your story. You feel a duty to learn as much as you can. Try to gather as much truth as you can.
Yep, absolutely. And so as I learn more of what Joseph Smith taught about reading the best books, about Mormonism is truth, we are allowed to accept any truth, no matter its source, without the superstitious notion of men. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is exactly what I've wanted. This is
fearless in the face of pursuing the truth.
I can stand up. There's no just ignore it. It's like, no, let's work it through. Let's work out our own salvation. Let's make sure our knowledge is based on a firm foundation that is ultimately in Christ. Because I've never denied that Christ was probably at that point the most superior teacher I've ever seen, the master of masters. I compared him at that time to Buddha, kind of. But now, as I'm learning more and reading the New Testament with a new view, I'm like, no, this is a superior teaching than the Buddha. And so I'm like, missionaries are coming over, and they're just wanting to do the basic plan of salvation. I'm like, I got all that. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about this other stuff.
Was it the Preach My Gospel manual they were using? Okay.
Yep.
So in my day, it was those 6 colored discussions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Same. And so they're going through that, and I'm like, yep, I get it. No questions on that. Let's talk about Adam God. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. And they say, oh, we don't really know too much about that.
The things available on the internet these days.
Yeah. And so I'm like, this is fascinating. Let's talk about this.
There's one group, I can't remember what it's called, but it's dedicated to the Adam God theory.
Yeah.
And they have a picture of Brigham Young wearing what looks like a MAGA hat, but it says, make Adam God again.
Yep. And then And so I'm not a proponent of that theory or anything like that, but those were the things that were fascinating.
But it's out there.
Yeah, and so it's like, all right, we're talking about prophetic succession and everything.
Well, rather than the stale correlated, stay within these lines, color within only these lines. Yeah. There's a wealth of pursuing ideas that's been historically a part of the church.
Yeah, and so they had certain answers that were kind of, sent you a link, and this is the church prepared answers and everything. And I was like, all right, that is an answer, but I'm looking for something a little bit more. And so I had to dig a little deeper, and my mom accidentally bought me a Denver Snuffer book as my first LDS literature. She just, Parting the Veil. I typed in LDS book on Amazon. This is the first one. It says it's a bestseller. So she gives me this, and so I'm going through the lessons. This is my first LDS literature, and it's talking about seeing our main goal of our religion is to see Christ face to face, and how to use send up the mountain to accomplish this.
And he's pretty solid with his scriptures. I haven't read that book that you're referring to, but I know that
he was a faithful member at that time. He acknowledged, the presidency and everything, that, they held the keys and everything. So it was completely in line with what the church was teaching, even though it was lesser known information and things that were taught. And wasn't really made aware of Joseph Smith and what things he told us to seek. And so I read this, and I just assumed that this was what everyone was in the religion for, to see angels and to be ministered by Jesus Christ and to have faith that it is possible in the first place, and to keep the patterns that have happened in the past going into the future.
Referring to those kind of heavenly, that connection with the heavenly realm and the earthly realm.
Absolutely. And that we're told to be prophets, priests, and kings. And the vision that I was seeing fold out in front of me was the most ennobling vision for humanity that I had ever seen. And so I was just massively impressed. My grandfather was in the hospital at this time as I'm getting lessons and stuff, and he was just getting maintenance and surgeries and stuff, and I'm reading the Book of Mormon as I'm sitting next to him, and he was the most Christ-like man that I've ever met. And so it was a very spiritual experience for me to, he didn't talk too much, and I couldn't really ask him too many questions, but just having his presence there as I was reading this document, understanding what he held so dear with the Book of Mormon, it was a very enlightening experience. So I read the whole Book of Mormon within 2 months, and every time they came back, I was like, yeah, I read past that. It's all good.
Was there certain themes? Was it kind of an overall recognition of truth, or were there certain themes that spoke to your soul?
So the baptism of fire, I kept seeing that come up. I kept seeing that more knowledge will be revealed. And that was always something I questioned whenever I was going to I'm like, why is it stopped now? Why, like, this is the end. This is no more information. God doesn't do anything like this anymore. He's put a cap on his potential. And that seems strange to me. And so you keep reading about more records being revealed from the dirt or from the dust of the earth. And so, like, at that time, I was, like, really into the Gospel of Thomas. I was really into all these other Gospels that were being revealed. And I'm like, wow, this tradition, out of all the traditions, should be prepared to be able to read these with the eye of the Spirit. And then I'm studying the Revelation, and I'm like, oh, Joseph Smith said there's much truth in these documents, but we need to read with the eye of discernment and everything. I'm like, this is powerful. And whenever you hear his descriptions that Christ is the light that enlighteneth our eyes, and then every man who seeks his face will understand his origin and these other things, I'm like, wow, this could really unite the Eastern viewpoint and the Western viewpoint into one peoples. And so that's something that appealed to me, that, like,
Bridging the gap.
Bridging the gap between people, and then learning about, like, everyone is literally sons and daughters of God if only they accept it in faith. The fact that, they are divine, the basic unit of divinity, and we can ascend together towards being like Christ. And that was, again, like I said, the most inspiring vision for humanity that I'd ever seen. And so when I was reading that God speaks to his children today, we are meant to lead the children that we find ourselves with on this earth into being of one heart and one spirit. That was the peace. Blessed be the peacemakers. I kept seeing that come up, and that really satisfied my soul. I'm like, this is the focus of, there should be no poor among you. I'm like, this is what humanity is supposed to be doing right now, but we got distracted with all the rigmarole of smoke machines and concerts and all this other stuff, and getting a donation. And
Wait, did you read any of those themes from Nibley? Because I know Nibley, he is really good at pointing out to where the higher nature of man closer to God and the raucous music happening somewhere else would call people away from it. So it's a pattern that repeats all over and over again, and Nibley's really good about pointing out those patterns.
Absolutely. So I loved watching his presentations, and I was like, all right, I'm actually getting a good vibe off of his spirit. I'm reading this Book of Mormon. I'm like, all right, 2 months is up. I'm ready to get baptized. They didn't even have to ask me. They're like, you're the best. This is awesome. This is what we've been looking for.
It's a little bit different than the first set of missionaries.
Yeah, totally different. I feel bad for those guys. Still Facebook friends with one of the missionaries. And, but anyways, all right, let's get baptized. So I got baptized. I had asked about the polygamy issue at that point, and they just sent me to the church website, which is fine. I was like,
was it the essays that were published at the time?
No, it was just a basic article.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, all right. Then I saw some videos on the Mormon transhumanists that were saying that he was a hesitant polygamist. I'm like, all right, he's not a perfect man. It's, he was having some issues and stuff. And all right, I'm cool with that. It's not a requirement for my salvation. I'll go ahead and get baptized.
It didn't seem like a big issue to you.
No, it didn't. And, I'm not even, what really kind of threw me off after I got baptized, I'm really into these ideas. I'm really philosophizing on fire. I'm like, this is the most beautiful gospel message I've ever heard, especially in the Book of Mormon, whenever it says, the prime desire, it should be, you should want to spread the gospel for eternity. Not just, I'm going to do my work here and then I'll be able to collect my reward in the afterlife. It's like, no, the gospel itself and sharing of it is the reward itself. Yeah. And I thought that was one of the most profound teachings in the Book of Mormon is like, there is always progress to be made in spreading the gospel to worlds without end. And so I'm like, all right, that doesn't affect that message. It's all good. And then I started to hear from Denver, because I was already a fan, some of the reasons why he got kicked out of the church and everything, and some of the reasons he put forth that, this narrative isn't as crystal clear as a lot of the scholars would have you believe in terms of his practices in terms of marriage and everything. And so I heard him make his case, and I'm like, wow, it wasn't that he wasn't just hesitant. He actually declared certain things were not of God.
And you're referring to Joseph Smith condemning polygamy publicly?
Yeah, condemning polygamy publicly, that there used to be a section in the Doctrine and Covenants that described the nature of marriage and specifically said, in bold letters,
the previous 101.
Yeah, no polygamy,
as much as this church has been accused of the crimes of fornication and polygamy, using those terms synonymously, we hereby declare that any man should have but one wife, and any woman but one husband.
So that kind of knocked me on my butt, and then I was like, oh, okay, that's a little bit more than just being hesitant. That's kind of, if what they say he did compared to what he published there. Well, it wasn't from Joseph Smith, they say. It wasn't a revelation. It was voted for by the church.
At what time in your life is that becoming something that you're digging into deeper? Because it sounds like leading up to you being baptized, it's okay, not a big deal. I feel satisfied moving forward. Yeah. When is this coming up more?
So I was baptized in 2017.
How old were you?
It's 5 years ago? 20. And I just turned.
What do you remember about your baptism?
Oh, yeah, we could talk about that. So my grandpa was a witness to my baptism. That was really cool. They didn't put enough water in the font for my baptism. So the missionary that was baptizing me, I was the first one that he had ever baptized, so he was quite nervous and everything. And so I stepped into the font. Is it up to your knees
or what?
It was to my probably right to my middle rib cage, right?
That seems deep enough. We could have handled that. You're not
maybe
too big.
Maybe under my rib cage. I don't know. All I know is whenever I'd go under, they had the mirror above you and everything, and I guess my knee was still above the water. So I guess it was lower. It had to be lower for my knee to be, because my feet were on the ground.
Well, I'm thinking of the reaction to where when you go down, your body naturally wants to stabilize itself with the leg coming up.
I don't even think it went up. It was because what happened was my knee was still popping up out of the water. I don't know how. I guess
how
it was
many
lower
attempts?
Than 3. Yeah, I took 3. So I had one. I popped back up. No, do it again. I had another one. I'm like, all right, this third one, I got to get it. So I had to end up putting my legs out like this for me to go under all the way. And I had to put my legs back under me and stand up. And I was like, hey, at least I got it done. I'll take it as symbolic. I need extra cleaning because of how rambunctious
there we go.
Or whatever. So
there we go.
3 threes, right? So from that, I did feel at peace. I was like, yes, I've actually committed to something. I was always in the gray area there for a while, and I'm actually saying, no, I'm going to pursue this path. So I felt really good about that. I was happy my family was there, encouraging my path, even though they didn't agree with the majority of it. They thought, hey, he's joining the cult. Hey, well, at least it's a friendly cult or whatever. And
at least they've got a good football team.
Yes.
Sometimes,
yeah. And so yeah, it was a good positive experience overall. And so after that, it's I'm very on fire about these topics. I'm spreading these conversations, and that's how I ended up talking about Jordan Peterson in relation to the Book of Mormon. And one of the guys, Morgan, he reached out and he said, hey, I got this group, and that's how he put me into the Latter-day
Lobsters.
And which was the group that ended up, I would listen to Denver Snuffer, and I'd put out these questions And then I would realize that there's no real good answers because these are the smartest guys around that have looked at this stuff, and there's not really satisfying answers to it.
How commonly
this is the topic where it goes to you just need to have faith. Don't question it. And
how
so I'm
unsatisfying.
like, here it is.
See, I
again.
know
Yeah.
I had frustrations with my mom, especially in my teenage years, because of her method of, well, I'm the mom, and if I didn't hear a reason that was satisfying, that's not acceptable to me. I knew that with my dad, if there was something like, Dad, I want to go to this party, or I want to go somewhere. Well, no, I don't think so because of this. But, and if I'd stack up 4 or 5 reasons, he'd say, well, you still have to take care of this, this, and this, and that. If I realized that his case was stronger, it was satisfying for me to get a no from him. But if he recognized that my case was stronger, he would make a compromise, and that felt good. So in other words, I wasn't just being dealt with because I said so.
Yeah. Yeah. And so whenever I was hearing these, there was no compromising on this issue. He was this, he was that, he did do this, he did lie about this.
In other words, this is as you're investigating Joseph Smith and polygamy?
Yes.
Okay, so
I'm
you're bringing
already,
that one up.
I'm already in this group.
And the lobsters aren't giving you anything
I'm
satisfying.
the only guy making posts about this saying, hey, isn't this like kind of like foundational to our church, like the testimony of Joseph Smith? Like, isn't this an issue that needs to be resolved at least? Like, instead of being so clear, like, I'm hearing evidences against this case. I'm hearing some good arguments. I want to hear what you guys think as true blue Mormons, what the counter arguments are to this, and how do you justify it in the face of you supporting these counter arguments? And they just weren't very satisfying to me overall. And I wish these people that I love so much would at least shrug their shoulders. But a lot of them, I don't know exactly what happened. That would be way more justifiable.
I really do. Yeah. I don't throw stones at people
Yeah.
who say I don't know.
Yeah,
that's an honest position. I don't know.
But then they say, no, I will be a judge of his character, and he was a deeply flawed man and potentially even a fallen prophet. But I've heard this in the group. There's a reason why God took out Joseph Smith whenever he did. And so they say, because of the practices that he
and these are still active members as far as you can tell?
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so this was kind of concerning to me. But I just keep attending church, and I'm enjoying my experience.
Callings?
Yep, I'm getting some callings, missionary, ward missionary, going out with the missionaries, helping with lessons and everything. Chaz likes to talk about this stuff. Let's put him out there. And so in the back of my head, there was always this like hesitation, like I'm struggling with this. I'm kind of having some issues with talking to people about something I'm so passionate about, because I don't want to introduce them to the same struggles that I'm having right now, and the conflict that is happening internally.
Well, it seems like you handle the mental struggles in stride. You're willing to move forward as you're figuring things out.
Absolutely.
For others, it would bring their world to an end.
Well, I'd kind of already given a presentation with all the things wrong with Mormonism when I was 14, so I had time to kind of consider it before, and this was just one more thing that I would have to come to a resolution that was satisfying, because I had already been inspired to such an extent that I couldn't go back. And so I'm like, what is this issue? How do I fix it? I'm learning more information, and I'm understanding that there's a growth of individuals that are having the same questions that I am, and they're trying to be faithful members of the church, but they're getting reprimanded for, they want to stay in the church, but they're getting strongly reprimanded for saying certain things, because it's strange how much of an issue this question is, because it calls into question everything else from there.
Well, it becomes obvious in the 1990s there was the plan to, well, we won't publish it in our books, we won't bring it up anymore, and the issue will go away.
And then
with the leadership not recognizing what's going to happen with the internet making information so instantly accessible, and things don't get forgotten.
Yep, the internet's forever. So I was like, all right, I'm having some issues here. I actually go to, a couple years go by, I'm dealing with them.
And help me understand, I'm having some issues here. What does that mean? How do I reconcile this?
How do I reconcile this? The testimony of Joseph Smith is getting called into question. He's supposed to be, the prophet in the latter days. He's the head of a dispensation.
You recognize the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon.
Yep.
God used him for that.
Doctrine and Covenants is the most inspiring scripture I've ever read in my whole
life.
And
why do we have public declarations of one man, one woman, no exception, accompanied with, but he's secretly banging teenage girls and kicking them out of the house when Emma finds out?
Right. and then I've heard, Daniel Peterson giving presentation. Well, there's no real evidence that at least the young girl thing happened. All these other testimonies for sure happened, but the young girl thing, yeah, that's still a little debatable. Like that was too far for them to say, was it? Even though they were pretty okay with it back in the early days. So I'm having these questions. I'm like, how do I reconcile this? And ultimately, I'm like, I came to a point where I'm like, well, I just need to join these I need to see what these Denver Snuffer guys are up to. So I go to the Denver Snuffer group. They were super friendly, super open-minded, very knowledgeable in the scriptures. I really enjoyed the presence there. They're very, they're very flexible. They were doing baptisms in the jacuzzi and rebaptisms. So that was a new concept that I hadn't heard. That was, again, they had all this knowledge of stuff that was happening in the early church, and they were instead of taking the sacrament to recommit to their baptismal covenants, they were just rebaptizing, which I thought was kind of interesting. But ultimately, they were doing real bread and wine sacrament, and I thought that was really neat and everything. And they were holding hands, doing prayers in the prayer circle. I thought that was kind of neat too. But ultimately, I'm like, no, this isn't it either. I gotta figure out something's off with this too. I don't hold any bad, feelings towards them or anything.
It sounds like it was a positive experience.
Yeah,
witnessing
it. It made it a little bit more real. It made it. I'm like, this might have been a little bit closer to what the early saints were like, meeting in each other's homes, practicing these prayers together and everything. And so it was a positive experience. I'm friends with a lot of them still. I'm like, no, this isn't the solution. I got to figure out something else. I really enjoy going to my local congregation still. My mom has known these people for decades, going back with the family history and everything. And I'm like, I gotta stick around and help these people kind of at least become aware of these issues that I myself am dealing with, so that we can come to a conclusion together. And so that was my approach, is kind of working from the inside to try and ask the right questions at the right time, not blatantly saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
It's pretty easy to say you're wrong. It doesn't take any sort of intellectual scholar to say you're wrong.
Yeah. And so on the internet, I was doing that for a while. And so the lobsters, with their attitude that they had, was pretty critical in response. They would throw right back at you, which I appreciate, because it sharpened. If
you're going to give it, you better take it.
Right. And so it sharpened me. And so it made me look into these issues deeper. But I was like, so after getting denied, this isn't making any progress with anyone. Whenever I'm coming at it with this attitude, I have to change my approach. And so I'm like, all right, I'm settled in. The years are going by. This is good. I'm going to establish my life here. I'm going to have these weird beliefs, but eventually I'm going to go through the temple and I'm going to get endowed and everything. And it's all good. And then 2020 comes around, and that's whenever everything gets locked down. Everything gets shut down. The leaders say, you're not allowed to go to your local congregations anymore. I'm like, I don't even have that anymore. I'm already having these issues, and you don't even I'm not even able to experience the thing that I appreciate the most, which is
how serious were the mask policies in Arizona?
In Arizona, probably less than most places. In Buckeye was almost like non-existent. They didn't really care out here.
I like these rebellious cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, in church, they were very strict, and they weren't a lot. But in terms of the culture around here, there wasn't too much. But in the church, it was very serious, because the prophet told us that we need to be doing X, Y, and Z. And so I was like, I'm having a real issue with this. We should be staying open. I have some suspicions with the severity of certain things that they're describing this plague to be and everything. And I'm not afraid. I never really wore a mask. Only when required, I put on one of the face shields so I could still show emotion towards my fellow human being and everything. That was the bare minimum I was willing to do if I had to go into a medical facility or something like that.
Just grow your beard out longer and you can do that.
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of what I'm working on right now. But it's a struggle. I got patchy jeans. But
I'll give you a blessing. We'll see. I don't think I'm allowed to use blessings for that, but we'll see.
Get using anointing oil. So I'm like, oh, this isn't good. Oh, well, I guess I'm just going to do sacrament at home. This is kind of cool. I can bless the bread myself and kind of pass it to my family. That's pretty fun. I'm enjoying this new independence. And, hey, that was a revelation that Nelson had, that we're going to have more home-based church. That's what he told. It was perfect timing. And this is the narrative that's going
almost on. Like there's a plan.
Yeah. We're going to have a home-based church and everything. That was right before this all happened. And here we are practicing at home. Okay, cool. maybe there is something to this. He's just trying to make sure that the church isn't liable for any undue harm or anything. They're just playing it safe. It's a global church. They got to do what they got to do. Recognize it. And then
I think everybody has heard those same those same explanations.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, this is all right for a while. And then I'm still defending the church. All this craziness is going on. The world's freaking out. I'm saying the stereotypical things that, I'm seeing people attack the church whenever their trumpet fell down. This is a sign from God that the trumpet fell down off the temple. I'm like,
in the midst of a toilet paper shortage.
In the midst of a toilet paper shortage, I'm like, this is not a sign. It's just a thing, that happened to happen.
Coincidence.
It's a heavy trumpet. I mean, come on, And so I'm like, the Latter-day Saints are good people. They're going to actually probably help us get out of this mess that we're in and everything. Just watch. That's what I kept saying. Just watch. And then the vaccine came out. And I was like, all right, hopefully they don't say anything.
Oh, boy. Wishful thinking.
Hopefully they don't say anything if they don't come out outright and say, no, don't take it. At least don't say
because
anything.
You're hesitant about whether it should be pushed the way that it was being pushed by politicians.
Yeah, it came out way too fast for me to have confidence in it or anything like
Operation Warp Speed. Thank you, Trump.
Yep. I was a big Trump guy at the same time, and so I went from Bernie to Trump. That's
Oh, boy.
I'm willing to change my mind with new information. So here,
I think Ron Paul was in there at one point.
Yeah,
so we'll skip that right now. But keep going. Trump brings you Operation Warp Speed. You're saying as long as the church doesn't come out in promoting the medical experiment,
just don't say anything. You're so neutral on so many other things. Just stay neutral on this, please. And here I see the prophet with his mask getting jabbed and all the other ones, and he's saying, we encourage you to take the vaccine. It is safe and
literal
effective.
godsend, safe and effective.
Safe and effective. And I'm like, man, why did you have to do that? Why? And I posted this on the Lobsters. I'm like, guys, do you really think that he has the knowledge, just because he was a medical practitioner for him to be saying these things? And they were very confident. Yeah, no, I'm fine. It's a vaccine. It's science, Chaz. Don't worry about it.
So it sounds like most of the responses that you're getting from that group are in support of the position of the church.
Yeah, it's a vaccine. Don't be silly, Chaz. We have vaccines all day long. Well, it's not. We don't take mRNA vaccines that are rushed within a couple of months and all this other stuff. Don't you think it's a little weird? In the very least, why didn't the prophet say, please prayerfully consider whether the vaccine is right for you in your life circumstance?
Instead, it was, we encourage everybody to get it.
We encourage you to get it. It's safe and effective, whenever they had no right to say that, unless it was revelation from God. So a lot of people assume that it was revelation from God because there's no other way that they could know that it's safe and effective because there was no data. And so they said that, and I was like, man, this is really troublesome to me. And I'm like, maybe I need to find a new faith community. I can hold on to the truths that I have, but I really need to be with more like-minded individuals. And so I started attending an Eastern Orthodox church locally because I heard that they were very resistive to these measures, and they never stopped holding service. And I show up, and I'm like, wow, these are some really cool, like-minded individuals in terms of being hesitant to trusting in the arm of the flesh.
How similar is it to the kind of outfits and services that people know from Roman Catholic services?
So it's quite similar. They don't have so many statues. They have icons. You'll see like a two-dimensional kind of stylized picture of Jesus and Mary oftentimes. So they hold Mary in high regard and everything. And but their priests are able to get married. So that was more in line with what I felt like God's design was and everything.
That sounds kind of natural.
Yeah, so the priests are able to get married, and they still believe that we're supposed
beards?
So they say that human beings are the icon of Christ. So if men are able to grow beards, they should grow beards because Jesus had a beard. And it's and so they had the doctrine of theosis, which is very close to the doctrine of exaltation that we have, that we should be striving to become as much like God as possible in this life, if not in the next. And they pray for the salvation of the dead. They claim that they have apostolic priesthood all the way from the beginning. So I'm like, hey, these guys, they got more in common with us than anyone else. At least they have a backbone. They're sticking up to this stuff. And I go in there, no mask, in the peak of COVID, no mask. They're all taking their.
It is nice to see men of God who actually have a backbone.
Yeah, and they were standing up, making posts about things to be wary on their website, posting things saying this is a biological experiment being put on the people, and you be very cautious and everything. I'm like,
did you notice? Did the government try to do anything about that? Because how big are these services? Are we talking a few hundred people in attendance?
Oh no, this is quite a small denomination, but they still had cops
few dozen?
on there. No, I'd say 50 at this time. I think they're up to like almost close to like 85 at this point. They're growing pretty good for what they are. They're quite enigmatic to people because they're Russia, but they do their services in English. So
during the height of COVID, what would the cops be doing?
They would patrol and knock on the door, and
of the church.
Yeah, and so ultimately they were like, we have a constitutional right to be able to practice this. As they opened the door with the incense rolling out the doors and everything, and so they were all about the smells and the bells there and everything, and they're literally taking their Eucharist from. And the cops didn't get crazy trying to shut them down? No, they were pretty all right. They ended up saying, okay, we'll back off. But yeah, they were taking their Eucharist because they put the bread and the wine there, and they stand in line, and then the priest feeds the spoon with the bread and the wine to each member of the congregation on the same spoon. So they're saying, I'm like, wow, that's talk about backbone. I might as well have just licked the doorknob on the way in. Right. So talk about backbone. So everyone's still receiving, doing what they've always done. They're saying, we're not going to stop this. And so I talked to the priest after, Father John, and he's a very holy man. I hold him in high regard. And even though he has some strong opinions against Mormons, he's still doing it with a friendly heart, which I give him credit. But I'm like, so how are you guys able to do this? Isn't this like foreboding right now? And he's like, oh, we survived the Black Plague. We'll be fine with this. And so yeah, he's like, you think is he Russian? No, he's from New York, but he was like taught by Russians. I see. I would if I were portraying this in a movie, I would love to get a Russian saying, "You think this bad?" Yeah, exactly. So he's like, and I'm the one at the end that takes the spoon after my whole congregation has done it. So if anyone's gonna die, it's gonna be me because I'm the last of them all. And so he's like very confident. No, it's sanctified. We can't get sick from it. It's nothing to worry about. And so he's answering my questions. From what you could observe, did that remain true? Was there outbreaks as a result of these? No. These community church services taking the sacrament together one with another. No, there was no issues. No one, and if they got sick, they stayed home, and then they showed up the next week. And if it was COVID or just influenza, they didn't get tested. They were fine. And so this is backing up my opinions even a little bit more. And as I'm attending these church services, I'm like, this is really beautiful. I'm really enjoying the imagery, the smells, and the candles, and the singing. It's activating all my senses. It's beautiful. I'm of the opinion that beauty will save us. So I'm like, this is part of my core values that I'm seeing here. They're encouraging artists to be engaged in their religious faith. They're, the carpenters and everything that we're losing today in our automated technologic world. They're encouraging the human aspect of creation that we need to be embracing more as a people. And so I'm like, this is really cool. This might be a home for me. I'm really appreciating a lot of these, and they're very prayers of the heart, internal, loving, non-judgment. I'm like, let me ask it this way. Were you recognizing a difference in closeness to Christ? Very devout and very committed individuals. What was the difference that you noticed, and how would you notice it? Whenever I would see them talk, they would just light up. They weren't afraid of anything. They weren't afraid to espouse any part of their doctrine. And they were like, this is a long-honored tradition that they would spread. And they're like, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. And we've had people thinking about these answers for thousands of years. You want an answer? Here, look, there's a whole book written on this question specifically about the nature of God. And it's like, so they were able to act with a certain confidence that allowed them to have a love and a patience. And I was like, it sounds like they weren't given the answer, just have faith. No. They had answers too. And they were also okay saying, that's a good question. We don't know, but I think that more people are saved than we would assume. And, that was the type of, when it came to hell, it's like, I think God has ways of working this stuff out. That was their answer instead of saying, yep, they're going to hell, instead of clear cut, and so I'm like, this is pretty cool. Meanwhile, my phone's buzzing from my bishop saying, where you at? We're missing you at church and everything, because I didn't tell anyone, because they just started doing limited church services at this time. And So with the mask and everything, I'm like,
He's inviting you to the mask cult.
no singing, no nothing.
No singing?
No singing. Just show up with your mask, and so that's what was
Show
going
up with a mask, no singing.
Yep, because it was too dangerous, and then you had to wipe off the microphone every time you talked and everything. That was what was going on at the LDS church at this time, and so I was like, all right, I need to go talk to the bishop. So I go into the bishop, and he's got a mask on. I don't have a mask on at the meeting, and I love the guy. He's just trying to do his best with what he's hearing from the higher ups.
It is a very hierarchical culture to where you don't go against upper management.
Right. And so I'm talking to him, and I've been going to another church. And he's like, oh, you have? What church? And I told him, and he's like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but that's kind of an issue, isn't it?
Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah, Eastern.
Kind of an issue, right? Because we're like the one and only true
Right.
church. He mumbles from behind his mask, and I don't want to get too fault finding, but that's just what pops into my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, but another church, that's an issue.
Yeah. So, but he was very loving, very understanding. He's like, hey, well, we would love to have you back if you ever end up changing your mind. I said, all right, thank you, I appreciate it. So I met with them, gave him the courtesy, and so I started attending. I'm still attending the Orthodox church, and I hear some guys. They're like, "Yeah, we're gonna go to this monastery, and we're gonna do this." I'm like, "Where are you guys going?" And,
Monastery.
we're gonna go to a monastery. Would you like to go? And I was like, "Yeah, I'd like to go." And they're like, "You sure?" We're gonna be waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning and going to church services. And I was like, 5 a.m. in the morning. And they're like, "Yep." And
Is there a 5 a.m.?
yeah, so I'm like, well, I'm used to I'm waking up early enough. That sounds fine. So I go to the monastery, and it's fenced off, like barbed wire all around this monastery, and you walk
Like
in.
a compound?
Yep, and there's guard dogs. There's a hedge around Zion.
What kind
right?
of feeling are you getting when you first walk in?
It's fine. It's beautiful. That's the
It
weird
just seemed
thing.
protected?
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, there's a fence, and then the gate opens up on. I'm like, man, how do they have this much funds? There's like barely any people in the church that I went to, but there's some other different speaking congregations around Arizona. And so I go in there, and there's guard dogs around, and they're friendly looking, big guard dogs and everything, but they're like, don't touch the dogs. I was like, okay.
Don't touch the dogs.
And so I'm like, this is cool. I showed up in a short sleeve, though, and they're like, here, come with us. And the little nun.
Let's get you dressed properly.
With just her face poking out with the
How old is she?
brightest smile. Probably 45. And she's just a little thing. She's like 4 foot tall.
Are the nuns all single?
Yeah.
Because the priests can get married.
Yeah, the priest can get married. But
Not monks?
But not monks or nuns. So they renounce it all, like Paul. And so that's how they look at it. And so she's like, no, it's okay. We'll get you a new shirt, and then we'll get you some. I had some shorts on. They're like, we'll get you some pants. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And then my other guys that I gave them a ride, and they're like, we're sorry. We should have told you. We didn't even think about it.
Showing up dressed like a little hussy.
Yep. So I had a big pair of pants that I had to, the little clips that you put your keys on. I had to clip 2 belt straps together to hold my pants together the whole time there, but that was okay. No one was judging me. I felt very comfortable. And it's pretty interesting. They had a whole, their whole orchard was donated to them. They were needing to get olive trees and all these other fruit trees. And they were calling around, and they're like, we're actually going out of business. We'll donate you our whole inventory.
Ooh.
And so they got all their trees all at once. It was like 25 truckloads of trees that were all delivered.
Wow.
And so they said that was a sign from God that we're going to be
What
here.
a blessing.
Yeah, and I was like, this is really neat. I love, I don't know if you guys can see around, but I got about like 40 different fruit trees around
You and I are going to do a little bit of a B-roll footage. We'll walk around and get some footage.
All right, sounds good. And so I'm like talking to the nuns, talking to them about potential plants that they could be planting and everything. And she's literally like pulling out a notebook, like actually sincerely listening to me. I'm like, this is so awesome. This is all the stuff I like in one place. And they're like, they got raw goat milk. They got fresh pressed olive oils. They got fresh olives, and it's just delicious food. And you're sitting there eating, and they're up on a tower in the eating hall, and they're reading the lives of the saints. And so that's what they do, so people can understand previous saints that had lived and how they lived and the morals of their lives and everything. So I'm like, this is pretty neat. This is cool. And I felt like it was the closest that I had ever been to a people being of one heart and one mind in a highly secured walled garden, if you will.
Yeah. From what you could tell, what percentage of things came from the outside, whether it was plates or food, clothing?
It was all made on site, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
everything.
Yeah,
Wow.
from what I understand. And but all the food was pretty much made except for supplemental stuff from what I understand. But the majority, that was very let's make it let's be as independent as
As
possible.
self-sufficient as possible.
Yep.
Okay.
And so it's 5 a.m. rolls around. I'm going to the service, and it's the smells and the bells and the most beautiful church I've ever been in. It's like a time portal. I'm like, wow, this must have been closer. There's like no electricity in this building. It's all candles. And the sun is just barely rising. And you're seeing the reflection off of this gilded paintings all around and the incense, and you hear the nuns singing angelically. And it's really neat. And you see the veil opening and closing, and you see the crucifixion of Christ back there, and there's the whole crossing. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. And so I ended up leaving that experience very inspired, but still having the truths that I had in my head that Joseph Smith had revealed to me. And so on the way back, I'm asking my Orthodox friends, did you exist before you were born? And, some of these truths about the premortal existence. And I never really thought about that. This is some really deep questions. I'm kind of tired to be thinking about this stuff right now. And this is a little trip that's kind of tripping me out.
It seems like they're a bit more friendly and saying, leave me alone.
Yeah. So I'm still having these truths, and not necessarily contradictions. It's just more information.
Things that you want to see how they fit in.
Yeah, if they can fit in. And then I would describe certain teachings, and then I would say, yeah, that was from Joseph Smith. And he's like, well, he's actually kind of right to a large degree up until this point. And then they would politely say that. And so I kind of got a little tired. I wasn't getting they have a feast after their church services. So every time the church service is done, everyone gathers together.
A feast sounds better than a potluck.
Right. And so it is a potluck, but it's a feast that they call it. And everyone comes, and that's how they celebrate. And so I'm getting interactions with that, and I'm getting stimulated that way. But I don't know, something's just missing. And so I ended up slowly stop attending that church. And COVID restrictions are starting to become easier. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to start going to my main congregation, my singles ward again. And I start going to the congregation, and things are better. The bishop seems to be lightening up. He was like kind of admitting,
was it still the whole COVID lockdown mentality?
No, at this point when I started attending there again, it was we're lightening up. Hey, the temple's opening up. Hey, isn't that cool? Where you have to make an appointment. You got to do this.
Would leadership be in masks?
Oh, yeah, at this point. But more of the young people my age, they were not wearing the mask, even though they were suggested to. But you had to sit a row separate from everyone else. And, make sure there's a row in between each row. And I'm like, I'm sitting right next to the guy. What are you talking about? Why is there a space in front of me? This doesn't make any sense. But so I started attending again, and I'm like, all right, it's okay. It's okay. I didn't get the vaccine. Then I try and start dating, and every girl I meet is like vaccinated. I'm like, man, this is kind of an issue that I'm coming across.
I'm wondering about whether you're going to be able to bear offspring for me.
Not to sound like as bare bones as that, but that was kind of like, how do I politely ask this without like crushing her spirit if I express my opinion? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the eggs in the carton are in good shape anymore. Oh, boy.
I really hope if anyone did get the vaccine that everything is completely fine in your body and everything. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, don't want to ever wish harm on anybody, but the longer that goes out, the more red flags is far too mild of a term.
Yep.
There's bullhorns of warnings being sounded.
Don't get any more. No, don't matter. It doesn't matter any Martha Stewart commercial you see of her sharpening a katana. Don't get any more COVID vaccines, please. that just came out. There's a new advertisement where they hired Martha Stewart to encourage the new Omicron COVID vaccine. Oh, so. My goodness. Yeah. She's sharpening a katana for some reason in the kitchen. Yeah. So, anyways, I'm coming into issues. I'm like, all right, where am I going in the future? I'm trying to establish. I'm 27 years old. I'm trying to start a family. I'm trying to find a community that I'm sticking with. I'm still talking with some people from the Orthodox Church that I had made connections with. When you coming back? We like you. You really like it. It's like, but totally friendly manner, not like the badgering. Sometimes that can happen in the LDS Church. It's just like, hey, how you doing? So I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to have to figure it out, stop attending there for a while, and then I show up again. I'm really encouraged. I'm like, no, this is going to work. I'm going to find someone that's like-minded like me that was a little bit more resistive to the culture and everything. And I have met individuals that were like, no, I didn't get it, And so that's been encouraging, but I'm realizing that this was a huge rift, not only for me, but for a lot of members within the church.
It's been big.
It's been a wake-up call for a lot of people. And it's exacerbated the movement, the doctrine of Christ movement, whatever. I guess you can't really categorize it. It's just people that are like
it's a community.
Yeah, it's just people that are reading the Book of Mormon and saying, hey, maybe we need to refocus.
Yeah.
And so people are refocusing. I'm refocused. I'm trying to encourage certain things that are being revealed to me that seem more true than things that we're focusing on right now. In terms of general conference talks, I'm like, hey, let's get down to the meat of things a little bit more. You know, that's all well and good, but let's talk about. Let's get people's eyes light up again, because everyone's fogging over in these classes. Yeah. And I really want people to get inspired, because that's when you feel that electricity going on in between individuals. That's what I live for.
Yeah, I went to church with you, 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
Yeah.
Or 3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks ago. And that was fun, but it was Elders Quorum at the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But still, when you talk about eyes fogging over, it's interesting, the dynamics inside of Elders Quorum, because there will be those who are opposed to that top-down, push the medical experiment.
Yeah.
Who speak about it in a way to where you would never know that they had any opposition.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, because I have expressed my opposition to the bishop and other leadership in my ward, and they just recently, made me Sunday school president. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd be the best at this. I don't really read Come Follow Me like at all. Like, I don't. They're like, you know a lot of stuff though, Chaz. It'd be good. I think people really enjoy your talks and everything, and how you lead discussions. So I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And so
you could lay the hammer down if you want.
I guess so.
Boom.
I've been enjoying it so far, but yeah, I've been trying to guide it to where people are not having faith crises, but just saying, hey, let's try and direct people, refocus people to the more meat of the gospel, the doctrine of Christ.
Well, it's a pursuit of truth. If
right.
What we want is, I want to pursue some sort of established structure that's easy and I feel comfortable, well, that's just not the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I'm trying to avoid my previous spirit where I was like, I just want to be right. It doesn't matter what damage I do in the process.
It comes with maturity.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. When I was a 20-year-old missionary, I was convinced that I saw the whole world and the universe clearly as can be.
Yeah.
What a punk I was.
Yeah. And that comes with realizing that we're nothing. We need to know. Half the battle is knowing what we don't know. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to be humble. And so right now, yeah, that's kind of currently where I'm at. I'm still attending church. I'm the Sunday school president. I hate anybody in our leadership. If there's anything wrong going on, I hope it comes to truth and that they can repent. I hope that they eventually apologize for any potential damage that's been done from making such reckless recommendations in terms of medical advice and stuff. But right now, I'm just trying my best to work within the church and to help people come on to Christ.
Do you feel yourself growing closer to Christ in your current journey?
I am. I go through cycles, but
what's that like?
Like I said, I go through cycles, and I get new information, and it makes me question certain things. And I'm like, am I just, am I just believing things because I've been told to believe things? I've started this journey off with a certain mindset, and now I'm becoming so conflicted. Am I getting closer? Am I actually in threat of losing my faith because of the conflicts that I'm, coming into? But I think you said a little bit earlier in our private conversation that, it's like we go through these cycles of trials, and every time we loop back, it's like, oh, I'm lower than I ever have been before, but now I'm higher than I ever have been before. And I think there's going to be a point where it's like we come to a knowledge and a certainty that, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. But ultimately, Christ is my Savior, and He is at the head of our family, and He wants us all to come unto Him and to love one another, to love God, to bring out the best in one another, and to bring out the best in the earth in general, and to glorify creation in general. And there's nothing more than He desires than for us to recognize that truth and to gather more and more light. And so I feel like I'm on an upswing. We had some scripture reading before this, and I feel like it's encouraged the spirit to be here. And I'm glad you reached out and you decided to come out here to our little corner of Arizona.
It's good being here. Normally, I'll end by asking somebody's testimony of the Savior, but I hear it in your words describing your journey right now. Is there anything else you want to say regarding your testimony of the Savior, Jesus Christ?
No. I know that He is the greatest man that's ever walked this earth, and I know that he loves us, and I know that he is watching over us, and I know that he wants us to follow him and to be his sheep and to mature and to disciples with the childlike faith, but with an adult-like knowledge and awareness of the threats of this world. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.